Hey, everybody, we are live. I'm here with Adam Brown. I'm here with Kevin Little. I'm here with Brendan Sonnone. I am Trey Rowland, and today, the pièce de résistance, the final five of the Noles 24/7 most important player list. We have whittled our way down to the final five. I think the 1 and 2 were unanimous. I don't know how much of a variation we're going to have on this, the kind of the cream of the crop, if you will, of the Florida State roster. Pretty determined, however, important nonetheless, especially if you talk about the kind of expectations that are placed upon the Noles this season, and deservedly so. Guys, before we get started, if you're watching on YouTube live, thank you. Brendan, we're going to throw this on the old On the Bench audio feed as well, or is it just for our YouTube peeps?
No, we'll throw it on the OTB feed, and let's give a shout out to our sponsors, I suppose, right?
Fantastic. That was my favorite because I like to do my ad reads. You guys come in here and let's do some ad reads. Noles 24/7 On the Bench, sponsored by Chattanooga Whiskey. That is right. The finest hooch ever produced in Tennessee. Brendan holding up a big fat bottle of the single barrel.
Single barrel.
Why would you ever need more than one barrel? Only if your whiskey's garbage. The finest barrel, single, just delicious. Just all of the flavors that you think of, like happiness, right? In a bottle, right there by your hand. You'll be feeling good. You'll be doing great. It's the best whiskey out there from coast to coast. It smashes whatever you love. And they love Florida State football. You can't get better. So if you want to get just piss in a bathtub, blind drunk, Chattanooga Whiskey is the way to go. Just kidding. Drink responsibly. We love them. They have a bunch of craft variations as well, Brendan. So it's not only just that staple, what you can get, the 111, the single barrel stuff. Mm-hmm. They do a whole bunch of like artisanal, which is a fun word to say, types of brews as well, right?
I have a nice port wine finish behind me. Look at the ruby red on that. Yeah, so they do all sorts of cool stuff.
Look at that beautiful caramel ruby hue, and that can only come from Chattanooga Whiskey. The other booze you're drinking is trash. Chattanooga Whiskey, it's what we choose. And guys, if you want to tie one on and you're thinking, hey, let me take advantage of these mortgage rates that are out here now, which are so awesome, let's go to the Turner Group. Let's sell my home. Let's buy my home. They are the best husband-wife team. They own Central Florida. They own the entire state. They will take care of you no matter what your home buying, selling needs are. If you got a little rugrat that's 18 years old, you're booting them out of the house and they're going to FSU, they're going to Tallahassee. Don't rent, you moron. Buy a home. Put the kid in the home. Reap the rewards when they leave and get that money machine going. And have an investment for yourself. Don't light your money on fire like the Joker in Dark Knight. Invest. And the best investment that you could make in the real estate market is with the Turner Group. Guys, there's that number, 407-803-3885, the Turner Group. God, I love ad reads. All right. Something that I might love even more than ad reads is just the cream of the crop of this FSU roster. Guys, Adam, I'll start with you. What an exercise it was, shaking your head because you've just been blessed with such professionalism.
I've been dazzled. It's completely dazzled.
Absolutely bedazzled. It was an exercise to rank all these guys, and it was a fun exercise because the talent of the overall roster is much better. Were the top five a pretty easy choice for you, just kind of overall, before we get to the individual names?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first
1 and 2, yeah.
1 and 2 were really simple. And then, I feel like 3 through, 8 were all kind of guys you could flip and flop around. But for the most part, yeah, we were going to come to some sort of close consensus. I believe I had Bless Harris ranked number 4 overall. But he fell not far from there. So, yeah, I think for the most part, 1 and 2 were unanimous. 3 through 8, they were all kind of guys that you could move. They were movable pieces, but you weren't really wrong with any of them.
Brandon, you've been covering the team for a few years now. Where does this top 5, this upper echelon of the talent, compare to other teams of the past? Does it compare favorably to those teams that have achieved a lot in the Jimbo Fisher era? are we maybe overhyping it a little bit more in the pantheon of Florida State talent?
Yeah, there's some recency bias of what the top 5 would have looked like in recent years. So certainly some of that. I mean, we've been doing the 40 most important countdown since 2017, which was kind of also the countdown of
down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that roster on paper, if DeAndre Francois doesn't get hurt, and you have a handful of high-end NFL guys on that roster, and this is probably the closest to what FSU has had from a talent perspective since 2017, where you have multiple high-end NFL talents, a couple day one guys up there, a couple day two types that are within your top 5 or younger guys that are a little further down the list as well, Trey. So yeah, I mean it's a really good group, fairly top heavy, but like the depth stands out as much as anything with this list. I know we'll talk about that at some point too. But you're aided by some superstars at the top, which is a nice thing to have.
Kev, what about you? The top end talent. It seems that most of the talent would. I'm trying to think of what the split is, offense to defense. What do you think is the most important part of this team to you from a talent perspective, Kev?
I would say that the offense is really top loaded. The skill positions are going to be as good as you're going to see across the board anywhere in college football this year. I feel pretty confident saying that, you've got a top 3 quarterback in Jordan Travis. You've got probably a top 10 running back group, and then a top 5, top 3 wide receiver group, all that put together. I mean, that's about as good of a skill position group that you're going to see. The offensive line and defense, I think, are kind of a similar story where there's a few really bright spots, but for the most part, you have depth in those areas that you generally didn't have before. Sans probably the linebackers and the safeties, but the top end talent, I think we're going to end up talking a lot more about offensive and skill position, and that's not a bad thing because, I think there's a reason that those guys make the most money when they get to the NFL. They're just that important.
I agree with you, bud. Now, I think it's something too. Now, if you guys are in the chat live, throw your questions in, throw your comments in. We will address them as we are an interactive medium and we care about you, the viewer. So keep throwing those in. We'll address those. And I think at the end, maybe we can have an overall, we've talked about the talent of this team relative to Florida State of years past. I think maybe at the end of this, we should have a little bit of a discussion about the talent level relative to the teams that they're going to play, right? Mm-hmm. Talent level, relative to the rest of the nation. We've got high aspirations this year. I think it's fair to talk about that. We can get that to the end. I say, let's start the countdown and let's get to number 5. Who do we have at number 5? Ooh. Keon Coleman. Kevin had him at 5. Brendan had him at 5. Adam had him at 4. Zach 7. I 5. Chris 5. Dane 9. Did anybody have Keon above Johnny Wilson?
I think AB did.
Yeah, I think I did.
Okay, I'm going to let you start off first because you did have him at the high. And like I said, this grouping is very close. We recognize and we understand the talent level of Keon. Adam, why do you think that he's a more important player than the guy who's generally regarded as being, I would say, more explosive? That's arguable, but what's inarguable is his knowledge of the system and his experience on the team.
I think this was just one where I went with who I think is the better player between the two. And I think that some of that's going to play out in consistency. Johnny was too up and down for me last year with the drops and things like that. I mean, we know what his drop rates were. They were pretty rough as far as top flight wide receivers go. I think that Keon is the better player, the more consistent player. There's going to be some needing to learn the playbook and getting that rapport down with Jordan Travis, but that should be going on right now. That you get into camp, you get those kinks worked out, and then you get into that LSU game, and he's ready to roll. So for me, ultimately, I put Keon above because I just think he's a better player overall and going to be a more consistent player than what Johnny is.
Brendan, how do you think that he fits in the office? Have you gotten to see him work out a little bit since he's been on campus, Keon?
I've gotten to see him in person.
Okay, what do you think?
That's impressive in and of itself. If you're if you're one to be like, oh, that dude's thighs look good, then
I knew you would be. I know you checked that out. You
How his
listen. He's a
wrists
very
look?
thorough. He's a
Yeah, how
thorough
are his wrists?
analyst. Yeah, how are them thighs, brother?
well, the thighs. What you
Thumbs
want
up for the audio medium. Big thumbs up with a smile from Brendan for our guys listening on audio. Okay, keep going.
The wrist, I don't know. I didn't get close enough a look. We'll ask Dane for that. But
Well, Dane clearly is not super excited about his wrist size, seeing as he's ranked him at number 9.
I thought I was going to be like on the aggressive side for him, and we were all between 4 and 9 for him, so all kind of in a similar range.
Mhm.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean nothing crazy. I think you can make the case for him to be in the top 4, and I don't think Dane's crazy for having him in the 9. I think that's kind of the sweet spot in that general range for him because he is so physically imposing, and I think there's still a lot of development to go in his game. When you watch him at Michigan State, was such a poor quarterback. You could see that there is a lot of potential for him to keep growing into a vertical threat and to keep building on what he did as an intermediate threat this past year. What I've liked and what I've heard about him is that he's really kind of bought in pretty early on. You always hear positive things right in the summer. But like I've actually seen like he shows up to all these summer camps and he's there hanging out with coaches and hanging out with players and like joking around, and like he didn't have to be around at this point. Like he's spending time with them. So he's helping expedite that process that AB mentioned of kind of building chemistry. I've heard some pretty impressive things about his physical ability based on what they've done in player run practices and 7-on-7. So yeah, him and Johnny Wilson are going to be so close together, I think, for production this year. I think it's kind of a just pick which one you like more. I don't think you can go wrong with either.
Dane saying right now, Dane Draper, I would have had him a little higher if we saw him in person in her early return. So he would have raised his ranking from 9th. I say one thing that affected my ranking of him, having like a newcomer, especially a wide receiver. Sometimes there is a little bit of a growing pains getting integrated into the system. We saw that, with like an Andrew Parchment or something a couple years ago. I didn't have any of those concerns being like a newcomer, being integrated to Norvell's system and making a giant impact just because of what they did last year with guys like Johnny Wilson and Micah Pittman. Those guys were integrated very easily. So I don't expect maybe a game or two. I'm not really worried about him getting off to a slow start. He knows that this is where he's coming to show up and show out. And I think that he's going to make an instant impact in game 1, to be honest with you. Kev,
I think,
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I think that some people might balk at the idea that why we have 2 wide receivers. And I mean, I don't think I'm giving anything away. If you follow this series, Johnny Wilson hasn't been listed yet. Well, he's coming.
No,
I think that some people would maybe balk at the idea of having 2 wide receivers ranked in the top 5. And I just went and looked. I ranked Johnny 5th and I ranked Keon Coleman 4th. The passing game's got to be the thing that wins you football games moving forward. I don't think that you can. I know Mike's a running coach, and he believes in establishing the run and running the football, and I love that about him. And he very bluntly said that to us on the interview that we did with him when we had the film review, that he's always going to be a coach who leans into the running game. But I think for them to take the next step, to beat LSU last year, they went empty and threw the football. Yeah. To beat Clemson, they're going to need to throw the football successfully, and it's going to start with Johnny Wilson out wide and Keon Coleman out wide, winning one-on-one matchups and dominating football teams and dominating opposing cornerbacks. So Brendan thought he was aggressive. I felt like I needed to be aggressive with both of these guys because they are going to be the difference between winning 10 games and making the playoff, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I'm with you, especially after the conversation that we had with Coach Norvell. The emphasis on verticality, explosiveness, putting points on the board. Like it all starts with that run game and all the run concepts that they do. But it's so that they can throw the bomb to Johnny. It's so that they can hit the post with Keon. It's so that they can score points. Kevin, what do you think are the concepts in Norvell's offense that Keon is going to be able to unlock that maybe they didn't have last year? And then there has been some questions. I guess there's one guy who's very vehement about like who's Keon's backup. Like, so I guess where does he slot in like positionally, and who's he grouped with in Norvell's offense, in your opinion?
Yeah. So Keon, I think in a normal world, you're looking at him being in a similar position to Johnny Wilson, but obviously you're going to put them both on the field. They're both outside receivers, traditionally just being taller guys. I don't know. Keon is definitely has more skills available compared to Johnny Wilson. I think he's a more all around wide receiver when you compare them 1-to-1. I think Johnny Wilson does one or two things elite, and that's extremely valuable. But I think throughout this conversation, I've consistently gone back to guys that are either matchup winners because they are elite at everything, or guys that are matchup winners because they're good at everything, and guys that are matchup winners because they're elite at a few things.
Sure.
I think Keon Coleman is the Swiss Army knife out of the two of them. He's the guy that, if you're facing a team that has an undersized slot corner, maybe you put him on the inside and he kind of bullies the guy in the middle of the field. Maybe their second outside corner is a little bit, shorter, or he doesn't have the foot speed. You look at the matchups between him and Johnny Wilson, and you say, well, one of the two is gonna have a matchup, right? You can't cap both of them with safeties, otherwise you're going to be in trouble. So,
right.
I think Keon Coleman kind of offers a little bit more of like the screen game and the middle of the field game that you weren't quite getting out of Johnny Wilson. But that being said, I don't think he's quite the jump ball threat as Johnny Wilson. And I say that it's hard for me to say that because he is a huge
right?
jump ball threat. It's just Johnny Wilson is elite in that category. The kid's 6'7". But yeah, so I think he's going to be an all-around guy. I think what you saw kind of out of Darion Williamson last year in the few glimpses you saw him, they're going to get him involved in the screen game. They're going to get the ball in his hands. He's a big frame, physical runner, move downhill. You're going to have big guys in front of him. Johnny Wilson is probably one of the best perimeter blockers in the country. You put those two guys on the same side, that's the screen game threat all day. And so I think he's just going to be a guy that they use to move around in different places and kind of be a matchup nightmare.
Let's get to number 4, because we talked about all these great things that Keon Coleman did. However, we haven't even gotten there yet. So let's go to the defensive side of the ball. I do want to think. I want to think about that conversation that we just had about Keon when we talk about Johnny, who's still TBD. We don't know where he's going to be. But let's talk about Fabian Lovett. Kevin, you had him at 3. Brendan, you had him at 3. Adam, you had him at 6. Zach at 3. I had him at 6. Chris had him at 6. Dane had him at 10th. I'd like to see Dane's top 5. I'm very interested on what he had.
Pat Payton and Jaheim Bell.
Brendan, I was going to go to you because you haven't talked in a smidge. You can go next. Adam, go ahead. It's a lineman. Sorry, Brendan.
No, let Brendan go. I'm curious his thoughts. He had him at 3. I'm anxious to hear what he's got to say.
A gentleman.
Wow. Well, it's not an offensive lineman, to be fair. He was okay conceding.
That's true.
For a defensive lineman. So with Fabian Lovett, I think some pushback that we'll get for having him in our top 5, me having him in the top 3, is the defensive line additions via the transfer portal. Braden Fisk, Darrell Jackson, if he gets his waiver, whenever that may be.
That's a whole nother conversation, brother.
It indeed is. And then the returning guys as well. So you feel really good about the depth there, but much like the conversation with wide receiver, I think the staff's actions are reflective of how they value people. And they want to strengthen a strength at wide receiver by bringing in Keon Coleman. And then with Fabian Lovett, they want to strengthen a strength of having him returning, which that was the Battle's End shout out. That was a big win for Florida State to get him to come back instead of going pro. And then you invest in bringing in other talented defensive linemen with different skill sets as well. So you build around Fabian Lovett. And I think that's kind of why I put him at 3, just with what I know about their plan and solidifying the trenches and having an abundance of depth and versatility in different types of. They have multiple 300-pounders are going to be playing at any given time, right? But there are different types of 300-pounders. And Fabo is really the key piece of that, in my estimation, because he can play a 1 tech if he has to. He can play a 3 tech. You watched him against LSU last year. Watch him healthy before he hurts his foot at the end of that game. He is legitimately tossing around SEC offensive linemen multiple times throughout the course of the game. A healthy Fabian Lovett with another full off season under him. He's probably like 24 now, 23. He's a grown man. He will be an asset if healthy in helping you win the few games that you absolutely have to win to get to where you want to go. And that's my reasoning for having him in the top 3.
Yeah, he's like the centerpiece of all those combinations. It's always like, what's him and Jackson going to look like? What's him and Fisk going to look like? What's him and Farmer going to look like? But to me, I think always like whatever the 1A defense, like interior defensive line presence is, he's always a part of it. Adam, and I guess it's a question for the group as well, is he the consensus second best defensive lineman on the team?
Yeah,
in
I think
everybody's
so.
opinion? I think so.
I think so.
I think I had him ranked as such. I didn't know if anybody else thought maybe he might be the best. I'd like to see what Dane had in his top 5, but to me, he's the second best behind somebody we haven't talked about yet.
If we're talking about today,
right,
then I think he's your second best. I think both Fisk and Jackson have higher ceilings than him. Personally, could potentially go higher in a draft situation, but as it stands right now, if you're talking about playing the 2022 season, you give me 2 defensive tackles to take, or two defensive linemen to take, I'm taking him number 2.
Or ideally, even the 2023 season. That would be he'd probably be pretty valuable this year as well. Adam, go. What do you think about Fabian's game? What are the things that he's really good at? Or any room for improvement? Something that you want to see more out of him now? He's got some more comrades in arms in that defensive tackle room.
He's a great displacer of bodies. So guys that are in front of him, he does a great job of stacking and then removing them from their space. So I think Brendan said he, was throwing guys from Florida around and throwing guys from LSU around in the beginning of the season. Like that's what he does. He wins one-on-one matchups, and you need that. And his presence was sorely missed in the run game last year when he was out. So having him back in the fold is massive. I put him at 6 merely because I just think the way the game has trended, I put the 2 wide receivers above him. The top 2 we'll get to. I think everybody's able to guess that. And then I put Bless Harris up in my top 5. That's really the main reason why Fabo slid. I just value that what I perceive is going to be a top offensive tackle more than I do the defensive tackle. But Fabo is a stud. I mean, there's no denying it. He's a grown man. He's a guy that against LSU, I think you could argue was maybe the best player on the football field last year. And that's an impact. I mean, that's pretty damn significant. What, Kev?
I would probably say that after their defensive tackle went down, but
yeah, that's fair. But I mean, he's a stud. He's just a dude. He can rush the passer. It's not his strength, but he is able to do it. It's funny because I had Keon Coleman and Johnny Wilson paired, and I had Fabo and Braden Fisk paired. I was just looking at my rankings. I just feel like those guys, they are difference makers for your football team, and difference makers are always going to be important in the long run. And I don't think Brendan's wrong or Kev's wrong for having it at 3. I just dinged him a little bit because, like Brendan kind of said, you've got so many bodies in the D tackle room. I think it's tough to say even your best one is a top 5 guy when the drop off I don't think is significant there like it was last year. If it was the same room as last year, I think you could make the argument that Fabian Lovett might be number 2 overall.
Yeah, and that's fair too. Like I said, it's the most important list. So that's kind of how I put in some of my rankings too. Like if this guy did go down, how catastrophic would it be? Kevin, is the resident Fuller lover by every single solo video that you do, just taking a torch to the message board, lighting it aflame and laughing at the ashes. What does an improved interior presence, what sort of things can that unlock for defensive coordinator Adam Fuller? Like what sort of things does having a strong interior run stopping and pass rush presence, like what are the main benefits that the defense is going to see out of that?
Yeah. So this is the reason I put him so high. I put him at 3. Florida State's going to want to have a light box. They're going to want to stop explosive plays. And by doing that, and in order to do that, they're going to keep 2 safeties back as much as they can. It's what Iowa does. Iowa's got one of the best defenses in the country year in, year out.
Shout out.
It's what Georgia does for the most part. I think Georgia's a little bit more blitz heavy than Iowa, but still, all of these elite teams, all these elite defenses, they're built on being able to stop the run with as few people as possible and really focus on taking away the pass and the explosive pass in that. And so in order to do that, in order to keep those two safeties back, you have to trust your defensive line to win matchups up front. And they didn't when Fabian Lovett went out.
Mhm.
And it feels like every year, as someone who follows FSU, we're talking about the defensive line being the best unit on the team. I swear in preseason, we always say the defensive line is going to be the best unit on the team. And every year we get into the season and we're like, well, the defensive line isn't as good as we thought it was. It's not bad, but it's not great.
Yes.
What?
I'm guilty over here of
They
pride.
look like it, but for your point though, and I think that illustrates your point, is they look like they probably could have been against LSU, man. If everybody
Yeah.
remembers until the fumble and the late score and everything like that, they put the clamps to a very impressive LSU offense filled with a lot of receive, and a lot of it is because they couldn't get anything going. And you saw the stark difference that happened once Fabian Lovett got injured, like as far as like in the Louisville games and things of that nature. Like it was. I'm an idiot, dude. I saw it with my own eyes, and you guys backed it up with the analysis. So I think that even proves your point, Kevin.
And yeah, that's my thing is that Fabian's really the only person that I know that when he steps on the football field, he will be a dominant defensive tackle.
That's fair.
I can say, Braden Fisk looked good against Michigan. He looked pretty good against Michigan. I can say Darrell Jackson looked pretty good in times against Miami. I can say, Daniel Lyons has looked really good in practice. But we've evaluated these defensive tackles based off how they look in practice every year, and we've been wrong. I know Fabian Lovett's going to be good. And I know you can hang your hat on him being a dominant interior defensive tackle that can allow you to keep two safeties back and be successful as a defense. I hope the other guys work out. But I wouldn't trade that for knowing game one that he's going to be there for you.
Well said. Well said. Next guy on the list. I like that. Well said. I thought that was well said, dude. I mean, he's a stats guy, dude. You got to see it. Provable data. Number 3, Johnny
comes into view.
Yeah. So Kevin, you had him at 6. Brendan 4, Adam 5, Zach 4. I had him at 4, Chris 3, Dane 3. So I think this is kind of taking it back to the conversation we had on Keon Coleman. Who do you prefer in your? It's wild because the offense has 2 legitimate number 1 wide receivers. But what do you value higher in your number 1 wide receiver? Do you value the very, very good generalist, the guy who can do multiple things well, or do you kind of go like the Anderson Silva, Israel Adesanya route from MMA people? And do you like highly value the extreme specialist who's pretty good at some of the other stuff, but he is so overwhelmingly good at that one elite skill that it presents such a matchup problem? And for that, we're talking about the explosiveness, the size of Johnny Wilson. And honestly, man, because I love talking about it and watching it, that perimeter blocking in this offense, I think should be grouped right up in there with those elite jump ball skills because he demolishes, steamrolls, embarrasses people on the outside. And take a look at a lot of those chunk runs. Johnny Wilson was a part of those. So I think I'm going to go with passing guy. Got to go passing guy. Kevin, talk to me about Johnny Wilson. Looks like you were comparatively, you were lower on him than the rest of us, but he's clearly like one of the 5 most important guys on the team. What did you think? Why did you ding him a little bit versus Keon?
Yeah, so I put him behind Keon and behind Bless Harris for a similar reason that AB was talking about earlier, just tackles being very important. And I think we really believe in Bless Harris. Also, I think it's a product of, I think there have been a lot of times during this list where you can see where people who have been really high on a player end up being the lowest ranked on them on this list. And I think it's a little bit of this product of me being like, people are going to think I'm crazy for putting Johnny Wilson at 3 because I love Johnny Wilson. Johnny Wilson's probably my favorite player on this team in the sense of just what he brings you as an offensive coordinator. I mean, he's just a dude out there. His blocking shouldn't be underestimated. His jump ball threat. There's not a cornerback in the country that can line up one-on-one on a deep ball of Johnny Wilson and win consistently. Yeah, exactly. Johnny Wilson is a Madden creative player.
He literally is. That's a great comment.
DJ, yo,
crank the height as high as you can and just like throw him out there. Yeah. So I was low on him, but I think that was more of me just trying to read the room, and I'm glad that other people held up their end of the deal.
I love that, dude. That's just being honest, right? And you've never been one to throw your weight like in a crazy way behind a player. Tate Rodemaker for Heisman graphic every time we talk about him. Listen, and to me, we talked about the inconsistencies, which is something where you could say, well, again, maybe I do. Maybe Keon is more important. To me, that just shows that he's even as good as he was last year. He's still got another level up that he can go. And I thought that he got more comfortable as the year went on, as shown by him making a lot of tough catches over the middle. Not everything. He wasn't just like a fade route specialist. You know what I mean? Shout out to like the Jeff Bowden days. Like he made some tough catches, right, Brendan? Yeah. I mean, and you see Johnny Wilson every day at practice. It is conceivably, do you think there's a good chance that we could see an even better version of Johnny than what we saw last year after his breakout season?
Yes, I think that's why I had him ever so slightly higher among the two wide receivers. And like I've probably said other times that I think I would take Keon Coleman as a slightly better prospect than Johnny Wilson. But I think there's still, and as much room as I think Keon Coleman has to go, like I think Johnny Wilson has even more like left of what he can possibly hit. And we saw it this spring. And I think that's like we saw glimpses of it this spring with him becoming a more well-rounded wide receiver, because last year in the spring, it was a lot of that fade pattern stuff. Right. And then you had to see him get a little bit more comfortable during the season. And then that carried over to even more progress in the spring where he was just so businesslike, and his movement skills, like I thought was just so different than it was a year before. Like some of the agility and some of the ability to cut quickly. It didn't look to that extent a year ago. And so that's what excites me is like, what is a whole nother summer going to look like? What is having Keon Coleman opposite of you going to look like as far as spacing and room to operate? Like, yeah, there is the very realistic, and some of it's projection, right? But there's the very realistic possibility that Johnny Wilson takes another monstrous step forward, because he did last year too. Like he wasn't a household name going into the season. We didn't even know if he was anything other than a perimeter blocker.
Yeah,
maybe Kev did. But lo and behold, like
he was the first person I outlined in my 2022 season preview. I just got to point that out.
So humble, Kev.
Thump the chest, brother.
Johnny Wilson may not be like a household name right now, but I think like a general like football fans, like who's that really tall wide receiver for Florida State? And the next step is to become like everyone knows who Johnny Wilson is. I think that's possible this season.
It'll be interesting. As I refer back to the conversation we had with Norvell, he really, I explain your offensive philosophy. What's your philosophy? One-on-one matchups, our best guy, our worst matchup nightmare against your lesser defensive back. The worst matchup nightmare for anybody on this team physically. I'd say even offense and defense, right? It's got to be Johnny Wilson from a physical perspective. Adam, do you agree with that? Either him or Jaheim Bell, maybe. I don't know. Just because
Trey
of the position.
I don't. Wilson in the open field, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I what Johnny can do. I don't know.
Versus Johnny, Keon, Jaheim, Trey. I mean, I just think there's a plethora of them now.
It's nice. Good word. Yeah. Nice word.
There's just a lot of guys that are matchup freaks. I mean, I feel like I've had this epiphany every time, or this moment every time we've had this conversation during these lists, and it's like, how are you going to stop this offense?
It's a freak plethora, baby.
I just don't know how teams are going to do it. You should have the physical freak consistency of a Keon Coleman with maybe the next big step in Johnny Wilson. Oh, Zach chiming in with "I'm right." Okay, Zach. All right, Mr. Blowstein.
Hey, Zach.
It it really boggles my mind to think about what teams are going to try to do against this offense and how they're going to try to figure out a way to stop it. But yeah, I mean, as far as how many dudes are there that are, matchup nightmares, I mean, Jared Verse is, Johnny Wilson is, I think Brendan's right. Trey Benson is trying to tackle that guy is crazy difficult. Keon Coleman is, Jaheim Bell is, they're up and down this list now. I still think you can get in Johnny's chest and slow him down. And I wonder if teams have watched his film and maybe found some things that they feel like they can exploit of his game.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that being a little bit more press and getting up in his chest and seeing if he could get off of it. But if you're going to do that, you're going to open yourself up to a lot of other issues, like a Keon Coleman on the opposite side of the field, a Jaheim Bell running some pick stuff. So they've obviously offensively got ways to kind of to exploit those potential weakness areas for Johnny. I was excited to hear the spring that he had. I mean, Brendan constantly talks to us and kind of, says like, hey, like this looks really good. That looks really good. And then obviously gives super detailed practice reports about what's going on. It just seemed like Johnny was taking the next step. It's really freaking weird though. You don't hear about Johnny at all. Like this offseason and even last offseason, I'm not sure I've heard Johnny Wilson's name mentioned once by anybody. It's just like the guy just doesn't exist, and then he shows up and he's a freak show on the football field.
Is there something to that, Brendan? Is it just because he's a consistent presence, or is he more of a gamer?
I think he's apparently there was a 7-on-7. I mean, how much I would love to be there for those. There was just like a day where it was Keon Coleman, Johnny Wilson, and Destin Hill, like just all one day, all within like an hour, doing freaky things. Granted, 7-on-7, one day in the summertime, it is what it is. Cue in someone freaking out about the defensive back room now.
Oh, look at you, just writing the narratives for people. Fantastic.
He is quiet, so there's some of that, and I think like ultimately it's just human nature. Like we're all excited about the new toys, and there's a ton of them, and it's a lot of fun to like dream about. Oh, where are we going to put Jaheim Bell? Like, he's going to be in the slot. It's going to be an H-back. Can he put him at running back sometimes? Can he throw the football? Can he punt it? Like, yeah, like that's going to be fun. What is Keon Coleman going to do to take pressure off Johnny Wilson? What's Destin Hill like? Yeah, we're going to talk about all the new toys, but like really like some of the biggest wins of the offseason were bringing back Johnny Wilson, bringing back Trey Benson. Spoiler alert, who's going to be number one. You not only bring back Jordan Travis, I don't think it's been talked about a lot, but like you had to fend off like other programs at the Power 5 level that wanted Jordan Travis. He wanted to come back to Florida State.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Imagine his value on the open market, man. Like the top 5, top 3 quarterback in the entire country. Like
probably like I'm not privy to the exact details, but probably like 3. It would have been crazy if he did hit the open market. And so like we are so, I think this is a cool place that we're in as Florida State fans and followers right now, is that we're spoiled right now, right? Because of what you have coming back and your comfort level in that, and you can kind of look ahead to like what could be. But what could be is largely because of what already has been. How's that for philosophy?
That was good, dude. All right, very Aristotelian, very nice. Yeah, and for somebody just to add on to it, why I had him a little bit higher than Keon, for a coach that worships at the Church of Explosiveness, that's Johnny. That's Johnny all day. So let's move on to number 2. I don't think it's going to be a massive shock because a unanimous dose. Look at all those deuces on the board. Patrick Swayze would be happy with all those double deuces. Kevin 2, Adam 2, Brendan 2, I'm 2. Everybody's a 2. Deuce party. It's Jared Verse, and on any other team that their best player wasn't their quarterback, this guy has a shot at being the best player at pretty much almost any team in the country. He came out of the gates. He transitioned from the FCS level seamlessly. He was a monster pass rusher. I was extremely, and I'll keep talking about it forever, the power that he possesses, and that was right from the rip, I thought was extremely impressive. I don't really feel like anybody talked about it as much as we did. And I thought he had a wonderful year, put himself on draft radars. And he's still got a lot to improve. There was a couple times he took himself out of plays last year, specifically defending the run and the zone read and things like that. So once again, one of the best, if not the best edge in the country, like one of them in that conversation for sure, if you look at mock draft boards, has room to improve. The sky's the limit. Adam, what do you think about Jared Verse's game? I mean, what are the things that he needs to improve upon? What are the things that he is elite at that makes him the second most important player on a conference championship contending team?
His power to speed is freakish. Like,
explain that to people that don't understand what you mean.
So he's able to play. He's able to engage with power, get you off balance, and then blow by you. He uses really strong hands, gets leverage, a strong punch, and then is able to dip and get underneath of you explosively. Okay. Like his speed to power is really good, and we said that was what he was best. Or I'm sorry, his power to speed. He was going to come in as a legit power rusher. He was going to need to kind of build off of that repertoire. He did last year, and he's still developing those rush moves. Like, I think the next step for him is developing a plan of attack every game, of understanding how to go into a football game and rush the quarterback and to beat the offensive tackle that he's going to line up across from. That's next level stuff that you hear a lot of pro players talk about a lot. Aiden Hutchinson was big on that when his time in Michigan. He was supposedly very, very highly regarded as a guy who went into with a plan of attack for every game for how he's going to win as a pass rusher. Those are the little nuances that Jared's going to need to continue to improve at. Stopping the run was probably the biggest thing that he needs to get better at. He played high way too often. I think JP talked about it a little bit in the springtime, and Jared did also. That was an area he needed to get better at, and that was something they felt like he could improve his draft stock. He gets upright a lot. He doesn't lose leverage, but he just gets upright and kind of run out of the play from time to time. So he's going to need to play with a little better pad level, a little bit lower, and learn to kind of control his gap and control that run game better. And if he can do that, like, there's no doubt in my mind he could be the best defensive player in the country this year.
Wow. High praise.
Am I wrong?
But the thing is, I agree with you because the intangibles, the pros popped off the screen so much that with tweaking of the things that you said and kind of just his development as a football player, the variety of moves, the strategic piece of being a defensive end, as far as like what you're using to set up moves and counter moves, you add that to that physical profile, dude, game over. Good luck blocking him, especially with Pat Payton on the other side. Just disgusting. A disgusting dilemma for offensive tackles throughout the Atlantic Coast Conference. Kevin, when you watch, go ahead, Adam. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I think he's serious about his craft too. I mean, Brendan can certainly speak this a lot better than I am, and I can. He's around these guys much more frequently than I've ever been, but he strikes me as a guy who takes this very seriously.
Did you guys know that he meditates before games?
No.
Like, he goes down the field, it's like for like 5 minutes. He picked that up from one of his teammates at Albany, and he does that before every game. Yeah, I was out at a camp at the end of June, and he went out by himself and just went to the corner and was just working on different like pass rush moves and agility stuff, just chilling by himself, like very cerebral, different player, different person, and not a surprise that he's successful.
Kevin, on film, anybody that he reminds you of, the things that stick out to you? I mean, how having that, I guess maybe elaborate on how we talked about the interior presence and why you rated Fabian Lovett so high. Talk about how much better Jared Verse could even get just with some of the help that he's going to get on the inside, man. Like, what do you do from an offensive line coach perspective, from an offensive coordinator perspective to stop this?
Yeah, I think you're looking at a pass rush that's pretty stout. I mean, we were talking about it last year, and that was before we really even knew what Pat Payton was going to bring to the table. And now you've got Braden Fisk sitting there as a potential an elite pass rushing 3 technique.
100 quarterback pressures in his career for Braden Fisk. 100
from the inside. Come on.
And then you can put someone either like Daryl Jackson or Fabian Lovett, who just kind of collapses the pocket, Or you
Mhm.
could put another true pass rusher there, like someone like Dennis Briggs, who has, is in the 80th, 90th percentile and pressures for a defensive tackle. And so that's just hard to defend. And like I was saying earlier, the defense wants to their main priority is to stop explosive plays. So they're going to cap you with 2 safeties, and they're trying to stop explosive plays. Other than coverages, the best way to stop explosive plays?
Tell me, Kevin.
Have a defensive end that can get in the backfield before the quarterback can take a 3-step drop.
Snuff it out, baby. Like, why make it so complicated? Blitz Schmitz. Just sack the quarterback every time, right? On offense, call the touchdown play. Defense, call the sack play.
Well, that's the thing. When people are saying, like, you should be more aggressive, you should be more aggressive, you should be more aggressive. But when the strength is Jared Verse and the weakness is secondary, you don't want to give extra help to Jared Verse,
Mm-hmm.
I had an
Preach.
article this off season. This I was going to be more like me fanning the flames. FSU
You can't help yourself. You complain about the board chaos, yet you thrive off of it. So go ahead, you little anarchist. Go ahead.
Adam Fuller's defense was top nationally, or at least top in Power 5 in its success rate when blitzing. So basically, when Adam Fuller said we're going to blitz, like they got home at a higher rate than anyone else in the country, which then spurred the criticism of why don't they blitz more often?
No, they wanted to limit the explosive plays. But I think the one thing that kind of encompasses what you guys are saying, not only is Jared Verse like the bedrock. Wow, this is great. Yeah, just go ahead, dude, Kevin. Start your own your own,
ASMR of
whatever, and OnlyFans, and just read out like success rates and like catch radiuses or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some like
wrist
nerd
sizes
For that. Hell,
Yeah.
I might subscribe.
I bet you would, Panama Red. But the thing about Jared Verse is that for some other units on the team, like the safety unit, the defensive back, we got some guys that are solid, but the depth behind there isn't as stout as the defensive line. Jared Verse makes all those other position groups on defense that are either good to somewhere questionable. He makes them all better too.
Mm-hmm.
He's like the Jordan Travis of the defense in that way, that the butterfly effect kind of emanates out. And the better he is, the better everybody is. So that's why I had him at number 2. And I think that's a lot of the reason why you guys did as well.
Yep.
All right. Let's go to number 1. Unanimous one. Drum roll.
Ryan Fitz. Oh, wait. That's not right.
Cotton Fitzsimmons. Maybe next year. Jordan Travis, unanimous 1. This is easy. Like we said, it's the most important position. And I would still argue that he's the best player on your team, regardless of position. I would say that just with his development, what he showed last year, his development as a passer, his development as a decision maker, his willingness to start to test some concepts over the field. And of course, whenever he needs to, think of the Florida game. He's got the wheels when he needs to, and he's still capable of doing the amazing. He's a legitimate Heisman front runner contender guy. I said that, Scott, if that happens. Dude. Just clip that out, dude, because I'm the jinx master right there. He's a legitimate Heisman contender at quarterback. I don't think that it can be overstated how important that he is and how good that he is. Now, Brendan Norvell said something that Jordan Travis not only praising all the things that I just said, but that he was also the most improved player this spring. True or false? What's the deal? I don't want you to call Norvell a liar, but go ahead.
Thank you for putting me in a really good situation there, Trey. I appreciate it. My vote would have been Johnny Wilson as the most improved player because I thought he expanded his game that much. But if the guy making $6 million a year to coach football wants to say that the quarterback 1 was the most improved player, far be it for me to disagree.
How many slingshots do you have? None.
He doesn't have any anymore either.
Oh, he's got a Maybach. Okay, never mind.
Yeah.
That even adds more credence to my point. Listen to the Maybach guy.
I just got a Subaru Outback, but
Oh,
you
congrats.
would, dude. Ska boy, just
Ska.
granola crumbs all over it. Just sure. I know you. I know you Central Florida people well. Continue. Okay. Where did you see Jordan Travis improving?
he was legitimately better in this spring. And I thought like this is kind of a continuation of what it was last season, which was also a continuation of what it was the season before. Like there's kind of this cool upward trajectory with Jordan Travis. If you guys haven't like caught on to that,
Wait,
I know
what?
you guys have. I'm saying the listeners know we get excited talking about Jordan Travis.
Of
'Cause he just
course,
keeps
man.
getting better, right? And what I saw with him, like with his A game, like his best ball, like the ones that make you go ooh, like he would do that a couple of times, in games last season. I think
Right.
the Georgia Tech game, he had a couple of really nice times down the sideline for scores where guys made him look really good after the catch as well. He made those big boy throws. I thought like the most confidence he's had and the most consistency he's had in making them in the spring, where he would just like let it rip and push the ball downfield with a level of like confidence and poise that I think was building off of last year. So from my like I'm not a coach, so there's seen things and knowing the progressions beyond what I can tell. But like just in terms of like raw physical ability, like that was definitely another step in the right direction for Jordan Travis.
Kevin, what is the most impressive part of Jordan Travis's game to you? And what are some things that if he could improve upon his really, really good performance from last year, could make Florida State a possible playoff team?
Yeah, so we have these stats.
Oh, well, that one guy's going to be happy. Read it to him in a very sultry voice.
So,
Not as good as I thought it would be.
Hey now, pressure.
yeah, so you can kind of see his progression from 2021 to 2022. So I think SIS made this chart, whoever that is. Thank you for making this. They chose blue as the highest color, which was a choice. So red is the lowest color, yellow right in the middle, gray above red for some reason. Yeah, their color coding is terrible. But if you're listening to audio, it doesn't matter. You can see where he went from red to blue, which is positive EPA rate versus pressure, sack interception rate versus pressure, and on target rate 20 plus yards downfield. Every other place he was generally pretty good: yards per attempt, depth of throw, boom bust percentage. That's interesting. I'll talk about that a little bit later. So if we're just talking about ways that he can potentially improve, you see that his on target rate, 20 plus yards downfield, positive EPA rate versus pressure, those both went up. I think that is a sign of two things. One, I think he understood the offense better. I think he was more comfortable operating within the offense. But two, I think he also had outlets that he didn't have the year before. And he has even more of those. So even if he doesn't improve as a quarterback from year to year, he has better options to him that will make him look better. Not saying that I don't think he will improve. I think that his mastery of the offense, getting the offense in the right play, understanding how to read the field, I think you're only going to see him throw more touchdowns and less interceptions as this year goes on. But I think on the truest level of where Jordan Travis is special comes in this boom and bust percentage. So these are just fancy percentages. These are percentiles, right? That have to do with +1 EPA versus -1 EPA. EPA is just estimated points average. It's not very important, but what it's saying is that even in 2021, he was elite in generating explosive plays, these boom plays, right? He's 26.5th percentile or percent, which is top percentile.
With an on-target rate in 2021, not so great, right? Which is interesting that boom percentage is so high. So is that would that indicate that a lot of it was actually through his legs, or is this all passing stats?
I think it's going to be through his legs and, yeah, I mean, I do think that both is included here. So I think part of that's through his legs. I think part of that, I mean, even if you're not terribly accurate downfield, at least you're making it. But that accuracy went way up. It probably helped to be throwing to Johnny Wilson at 6'7". The boom percentage, I mean, really has nowhere to go. I mean, it's already
Elite,
in the top percentile, right? Is already elite. His bust percentage went up, right? He wasn't getting negatives, right? He's now gotten to the point where he's really good at generating explosives and really good at avoiding non-explosives or negative plays. The guys, he's just a special college football player. Whether or not that translates to NFL is a totally different question. But do you know who the winningest quarterback was and is in college football history?
Go ahead, buddy. I know who it is.
Oh,
We've had this
God.
conversation before. Drop it, Mr. Bronco.
It's a guy that didn't start a single game in the NFL. Kellen Moore. So you can be a special college football player. You can be one of the best quarterbacks in the country and not be that guy. I think Jordan Travis definitely has a higher upside than Kellen Moore. I'm just saying that it's a different skill set, and I think he's an elite college player.
I agree. And I'd say, honestly, when you look at those numbers for those people that can't, it's a lot of blues, which is the highest percentile, and a lot of greens, which is next highest. The only thing that looks like he could really improve upon is his on target rate 10 to 19 yards, which would be that kind of middle of the field, which who knows, Mike just saying throw the bomb. There were a couple of games last year, if you want to talk about some of the faults, where the offense did stall. I think I remember the NC State game coming to mind where there was a lot of deep throws that we missed on. You had the Keon Colemans, you had the Jaheim Bells, you had the healthy Winston Wright. Now that middle of the field, now there is no place to stop Jordan Travis, especially when he's shown that type of meteoric improvement from year to year. That's fantastic. They love the A-Stats MR stuff. It's good stuff, Kevin. Like I said, you've unlocked a cottage industry. Adam, what do you think about these numbers? I'm sure they you don't like them. Numbers are.
I paid no attention.
Me don't like numbers. Coach, tell me
what
why
the hell
Jordan
you guys
good.
just were talking about.
Tell me why he's good to you, Coach, man.
I went back and found an old spring game film review that we did. Do you think it's okay if we turn it on?
Give it 5 minutes. I'm sure it'll be fine.
This is Jordan Travis in the 2020 spring game.
Oh, man, this is going to be fun. And,
I mean, it may move a little slow because I'm sure we're talking in the background, but I just look at those mechanics. Look at his feet and his arm. Look how out of sync he is. And think to now where he is now. I mean, I can't believe what he's become, what he's turned into. And I know a lot of people are sitting out there and they're going to say, oh, he's not. Yeah. I mean, look at that base. He's way out of rhythm. I'm amazed what he's become. I know a lot of people are I'm sure there's some people out there that are going to say, well, he's not a top this whatever quarterback in the country. I don't care what he is. He's a special football player for running this offense. And it's incredible what he has done to become an elite quarterback at the college football game and what the staff has done to help him. You were talking, Trey, you were talking about the one little bit of stat that I picked up. You were talking about
the one thing that I kind of listened to.
You were talking about the 0 to 9 yards.
Yeah, 10 to 19, that range. Yeah.
He, I mean, I can think the number of balls that got dropped in that range.
Yeah, his
hits have not to dump all over Cam McDonald, who hopefully makes the Green Bay Packers, but the number of passes that he dropped throughout the course of the year. I mean, it was 6, 7. You catch those, and suddenly things change drastically for you.
Why is Janarius Robinson 10 yards, 15 yards down?
Brother, don't. 2020 was a dark time.
Right, I'm turning it off because you're poking the bear. You're driving the Adam Fuller train. Here we go.
Adam Fuller would never.
Listen, go ahead, Adam. But you're right. Just from a mechanic standpoint, and that isn't something that just happens overnight. A lot of credit to Jordan Travis's game is given to his physical skill sets, his legs, things of that nature. This kid has put in so much work to become an elite passer of the football in the college game, right? Like, maybe not from an arm strength. He's maybe not the top of the heap from an arm strength perspective, but we've seen him throw a pretty deep ball, and we've seen him, more importantly, really up his accuracy, and his decision-making is really good. The boom or bust thing that Kevin said may be a stat that you heard for the first time tonight. Not too many negative plays when you think about Jordan Travis, which is impressive seeing how many times Florida State likes to generate explosive plays.
Yeah. His ability to run out of negatives is insane. I mean, you saw what he did against Florida. He single-handedly won that game for them with his ability to get away from the rush. I think this is an interesting. Oh, Ingram, what up, brother? What up,
Get
brother,
out
my
of my
dude?
chat.
You're the TBE ears.
Yo, man, come on now. I got time to be in here.
Plane.
We got to be out there. You know what?
Why are you talking like that when you like
I
talk
don't
to
know.
Ingram in the chat? Why do you put that affect on?
I get wild and crazy. I didn't want to have this conversation though. That's why I had this one up here.
Yeah,
he's not Jameis Winston 2.0.
No.
As far as the Mount Rushmore,
this is a good question.
If Jordan Travis does the things that we think he's going to do this year, and they, I don't know, go crazy and he wins the Heisman, and they make the playoff, does he make it on the Mount Rushmore?
He's number one on Mount Rushmore.
If he
wins the Heisman,
but he doesn't win a national championship.
He
can't be number one on the Mount Rushmore if he hasn't.
No, I would say if you won a Heisman, he would be one of 4 Heisman winning quarterbacks. I would put him on the Mount Rushmore quarterbacks if he won a Heisman, especially when you consider the transfer from Louisville and all the other crap and the improvement that you saw. The story is fantastic and leading Florida State out of the Marianas Trench of despair that we were really in at the end of the 2010s. I put him on the Mount Rushmore. I'll go a step further. If he wins the Heisman and Florida State wins the national championship, I think he's got an argument to be the GOAT.
Brendan's covering his face. He's face palming.
When you think about the totality of the story, and like I said, I'm saying that I'm knocking on all the faux wood that my overpriced, like crappy desk has. But I'm telling you, if I don't expect Florida State to win a national championship, but I'm telling you, if they did, it would be hard for me to deny that he would be the greatest quarterback of all time at Florida State. And you got guys like Chris Winkie that led people to multiple, and Jameis, who knows what Jameis would have done with another year playing, you know what I'm saying? So there's all those variables, but man, he would be in that conversation for me just because of the aura, the intangibles, man, which is really, that's so Jordan Travis because his effect is so hard to describe, right? Brendan, you've been on the train for a long time. Hypothetical Heisman, hypothetical Natty. Maybe don't even talk about it if you don't want to jinx it. But he's got a chance to solidify himself as one of the 4 to 5, 10 best football players all time at one of the all-time great college football programs.
If we're talking about like in program history,
I guess quarterback.
Then so if it's quarterback, I'll do one further by going backwards a step. I don't think he has to win a Heisman Trophy or make it to a national championship game. I think if he gets them to beat Clemson in the ACC championship game and he gets FSU back to a place where you're feeling some level of pride about the program nationally, I think he belongs in the top 4 for FSU quarterbacks of all time because of what you mentioned, Trey, that he was the face of bringing it from ashes back to a place of respectability. So I don't need a whole lot of convincing to think of Jordan Travis as someone who's an integral, super important person in getting this thing turned around. I don't think you have to win a championship to appreciate everything that he's done as a player to improve, to buy into what Mike Norvell has done, to be a champion of Mike Norvell and his staff. All those things are really important of what going to be part of Jordan Travis's legacy. If he does win a Heisman Trophy, if he does win a national championship, I don't think you're crazy at all, Trey, for saying that he would be the
like a
most
fox
memorable player in quarterback or in FSU history. Definitely quarterback. Yeah. Because it's rags to riches, and that's a story that we can all get behind.
American is apple pie, boys and girls. All right. One more question, because I told the people we'd talk about it. I don't know if you want to answer a couple questions or not before we get out of here. We've been over an hour, very robust conversation. Go ahead, Brendan.
I have some, before we get to listener questions, a real quick conversation piece for you guys. I pulled up from Front Office Sports, This is first round positional salary rankings. So basically, players who've been taken in the first round of the NFL draft all time, their career earnings. There are 4 positions that have over $2 billion in their careers. Basically, like value of the importance of the position, longevity, things like that. It just basically shows over time, like what positions are really, really valued at the highest level of football.
Gotcha.
Number one is quarterback. Number 2 is cornerback. Number 3, wide receiver. And number 4, defensive end. Those are the only 4 that have made over $2 billion in career earnings. FSU has potentially elite players at how many of those, elite college players at how many of those position groups of those 4?
3.
Like, that's a really good starting point, right?
3 and then very good.
I would take it even farther. They've got potentially 4 elite players at 3 of the positions, because I think Johnny and Keon are.
Oh, yeah, good point.
Elite.
Yeah, good
Well,
point
and if Cypress is what he was last year, I mean, he's an all ACC caliber corner.
Yeah, then he's in that conversation then too. So
That
I think
would
just
be
from like a
5 and
roster
4.
building standpoint, like they've invested resources and just time developing and transfer portal, all that stuff, melding into like this team is poised to do something very special. We talk a lot about the depth, deservedly so. I think that's what this like most important exercise to me has shown us how comfortable I am with the depth. But if we want to look at potential star power at the college level, like positions that really matter, I think FSU has a chance to do something special this year based on how they've built this roster.
Okay. Speaking of the roster, so I do want to get to it because I did tease it at the beginning. Adam, I'm going to go with you first, put you on the spot. From a total team talent perspective, now this is not a blue chip ratio. This is not a high school recruiting rankings thing, because Florida State's roster is constructed so differently than the traditional. A team talent perspective, where I'm talking about how good, the amount of good football players they have, whether they got them as elite high school prospects or they got them as elite transfer prospects, or it's guys that started off low that they developed into good football players. From a percentage of good football players on this roster perspective, where does Florida State rank nationally? Are they top 20, top 15, top 5, top 10? What do you think? Percentage of good football players. That's my percentage.
Yeah.
Which I'm using as a roster talent.
I think they probably have a top 10 roster. The problem becomes
the gap between like you said, like 7 and 1 or 7 and 2.
That's what becomes really difficult. I mean, I think that they can probably be competitive with anybody pure roster talent wise, because I think Jordan's that good. I think you've got two of the better wide receivers on the outside. They are matchup nightmares. If this offensive line was more proven and we knew it was going to be a little bit better, and you had one more defensive end that you knew could take that next step, I think you'd push them into top 4 territory. Georgia is just that much better than everybody else. Like that.
And that's a year-long stacking upon stacking of the upper echelon of elite high school talent. So the fact that Florida State is even able to catch up in the manner that they did, in the speed which they did, is very impressive. But that's a talent gap that you're going to have to overcome if you want national championship aspirations, i.e. that is where having a good X's and O's football staff helps.
Yeah.
Kevin, what do you think? Top 10, top 15? I think Adam laid out a very pretty cogent argument.
Yeah, I would say that top to bottom talent wise, you're going to be less than the Georgias, the Alabamas, the even
Ohio
potentially
States,
even potentially LSU, who's consistently getting top 10 recruiting classes. What's hard is I think you have elite talent where it matters, like Brendan was just getting at. And that's gonna pay dividends. That's gonna make you competitive against really anybody. Like on a down and down basis. I think there are places where, I mean, I don't fully trust this offensive line against really elite teams. I don't fully trust those safeties against really elite teams. So it's like there are holes on this roster, just not any that I see getting exploited particularly by anybody outside of the top 10.
Okay. Brendan, do
Yeah.
you agree? And it's one thing too. The veteran experience on this roster, I think, is something that is a true benefit, is a true asset to them. We've seen multiple times, and I'm sorry for invoking the name, but teams like Wake Forest with guys with beards, car payments, and 8 kids, they can drastically overplay their talent level because of experience in the system, veteran presence, something that Florida State has taken forever to finally build in this year that they are going for it all. Shout out the Battle's End. So, Brendan, what do you think, man? Just from that pure good roster talent in terms of good football players, where do we stack up?
I mean, I think top 10 safely is where I'm at right now. And I think it was you, Trey, who said development has been a big reason for this, right? You have so many guys with so many years in this program, and that combined with what they brought in with the transfer portal. Yeah, I think top 10. Like, how many teams, maybe like pose it this way, like how many teams do you think had more talent than them across the board last year when they played? Like LSU
20.
maybe did, but they haven't played LSU.
LSU had more talent. I would take LSU's roster.
LSU, Clemson. I mean, in terms of pure talent, like
I'm not sure Oklahoma didn't at the end of the year.
Oklahoma, I think, did.
What about Florida and Miami? Florida, Miami.
No,
were
I don't
heavily
think Florida
recruited.
or Miami did.
Florida maybe.
Florida was
Miami didn't. I mean, like we're talking about developed talent too. Like that does.
Yeah.
I would
like,
take
that is
NC
part-
State's
Oh, I
defense.
thought you were talking about like pure, like raw, like recruiting, like
Not just
blue chip
recruiting
ratio.
rankings.
Okay, yeah. As far as like percentage of talent of like good players, there was only maybe like 3 or 4 teams where it was like, yeah, they had you beat, and you still found ways to beat those teams.
to beat them, right? Like if we like we're able to get GPS tracking, right, and be able to tell them
Yeah.
this guy's the best
Right.
athlete, all that stuff. So last year, like you were in like 75th to 80th percentile, probably from a talent perspective in the Power Five. Like, and now it probably jumps to 90th percentile with everyone you have coming back and who you brought in. Yeah.
I think this season's going to boil down to, we're talking about the rosters and Kev was talking about like safety and stuff like this. I think this season's going to boil down to, if there's an offense that can block this defensive line, I think this defense is going to have some potential issues. But I think you could say that about most defenses, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right. Yeah,
the
absolutely.
majority of them, if you can block their pass rush, they're going to struggle. Or if you can block them and run the football, they're going to struggle. It's just how many teams are going to be able to block them. Like,
and outscore the offense.
I'm fairly,
you know what I
fairly
mean,
certain
right?
that Georgia could block them. Alabama probably could block them. But again, we're talking about the upper echelons of where we're trying to get to. And then where it makes me uneasy is how many defensive lines can beat this offensive line still. And that, it really does still worry me. I mean, I've been pretty bullish about what I think Bless Harris can be, but I don't know it for sure. And we haven't seen it. And every time I mention it on the message boards, people come back at me like, well, he's only played one game and he got hurt. And he didn't have a great track record at Lamar. And there's a lot of who knows where Jeremiah Byers is going to play. There's been some conversation. He may not even be a starter at the beginning of the year. Like,
so a lot of unknown there. To Kevin's
Yeah.
point, like the anti-Fabian Lovett point, that's kind of like what this offensive line is. For a team that does have these high aspirations, that's the one unknown because we haven't seen it all work together at this level.
Yeah.
So I'm with you.
To add on to that, you know how you beat Florida State in 2023?
Don't tell people now. You're going
to
do it again?
Nick,
You
Nick
beat
Kirby.
their offensive
Listen.
line. That's what Louisville did. That's what NC State did. That's what
Wake did it with the
Forest
wide
did.
9, yeah.
You beat FSU's offensive line. You take away the run game, and I think that they're gonna. If you can beat their offensive line and still keep 2 safeties back, like that's how you beat any offense. Like that's.
Yeah, but admittedly, that's going to be so much
going
more
to be a
difficult
little more
to do
difficult
this
than it
year.
was last year.
Right. So that's
Yeah.
the question. How many teams do you think can legitimately beat FSU's offensive line with 4 down guys?
But like, so that's a good question. Like, but I do want, like, this offensive line hasn't been built in the mold of like potentially being a top 5 offensive line in the country.
Sure.
What they've invested in is depth to make sure you don't have to play a hurt Darius Washington at a position that he wasn't playing all season against Wake Forest. What you're protecting against is an insurance policy if Robert Scott doesn't get back to be 100%.
Right.
Like
reliable. You built a reliable, deep unit so that you're not in the catastrophic scenario, right? They
Right.
may not be able to. They're going to dominate lesser talented teams, but they might not dominate the really, really good defensive lines. But I feel like it's more of a like a stalemate offensive line. Like it's going to give you just enough for all that plethora of freaks at the skill positions, led by one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, Jordan Travis. I think it's going to be good enough to score a lot of points.
Yeah.
All right. Quick hitters from the chat. Are there any good ones, or should we skedaddle out of here?
No, I think it's a lot of just conversation based on the kind of what we're talking about. There's some folks, what happens if only 50% of the transfers hit? I mean, there's a lot of worst case scenarios out there that we could go through that.
We're still a hurt fan base. Like, what about the best case scenario? What if they hit at the same rate that all the other
Marcus
ones
Lee
right?
Marcus Lee is definitely Kalen DeLoach's number one fan, and I give him a lot of respect because every list we've done when we've been on here, he's been in the comment section.
Yeah, like Kalen, yeah.
And here, yep, absolutely. He's
very talented player.
So
yeah,
respect to that. Who's going to the LSU game here? I'm just blowing through them here. There was a lot early that were good that we
covered it all
at the time. All the ASMR talk. Come on.
Most Smiths should be top 3. You need to be able to snap the ball. This is
Brendan. That's right. The inside joke that will never die. It continues to live on.
Gosh, how old is that joke now?
It's
almost
about a year. Almost a year. Maybe we'll do a
team
party.
draft coming up. Box checkers versus landing stickers in like a month.
Oh, fantastic, guys. Look forward to that.
Are we going to do anything different with that this year? Come on.
Oh,
I think AB wants to.
Did we even determine who won last year?
Yeah,
once again, we'll figure it all out. We're still in the off season. Things to come. Inside jokes being revived, anniversaries. We've got team drafts. We've got consternation about the format, and you can see it all play out here on the Noles 24/7 YouTube channel, the X's and Noles YouTube channel, the Noles 24/7 message board. My God, if you haven't signed up yet, you're being a bad teammate, a bad friend, and a bad lover. Just go and get on the Noles 24/7 message board. You don't want any of those things attached to you, so sign up right now. Paramount Plus rules. If you got kids, it's Paw Patrol all over the place, man. You got no excuse not to be on this message board. Love you guys. Great discussion. The 40th list. We made it through another one. It's almost real football time, guys. Stick with us a little bit longer.